Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm Evie Barrett, Senior Reporter at PRWeek UK. And today I'm joined by our news editor Siobhan Holt and our very special guest, Simon Gunning, Chief Executive of Campaign Against Living Miserably, or CALM, the suicide prevention charity. If you work in comms, you probably know CALM from some of its high-profile campaigns in recent years. It was responsible for The Last Photo, which won a whole host of awards a couple of years ago, and more recently its Miss Birthday's balloon installation at Westfield Shopping Centre in London. In the spirit of PRWeek's Mental Wellness Month, which has been running this January, we're going to be discussing all things mental health and PR, from the perspective of PR pros taking care of themselves and of the campaigns that PR teams produce to help raise awareness. Simon, you're especially well placed to discuss this, given your career background. I wondered if you could give us a bit of an overview on that, first of all, and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, very circuitous route. I started in music, promoting Reading Festival was my first job outside of university, and I thought that's what the world was like, just hang out with Kurt Cobain all the time. And then I carried on in music as a manager, managing record producers, and then artists, bands like Garbage, loads of bands, made some good records, loads of really shitty ones. And then into telly with Flextech, which was the biggest broadcaster in the UK of pay TV at the time. Then carried on telly with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and then to EMI, God, this is long, isn't it? Records, working for EMI Music across the 9 labels there. Then I went to the BBC. I was a marketing director at the BBC. And then just to finish it all off to BBH, where I worked for a few years in a network role around the offices in all bits of the world. So that was all very exciting. And then I was sort of wasting my time really doing consulting and stuff when BBH got sold, and I got a phone call from a guy called James Scroggs, who I'd met a few times through an ex-colleague, who was the chairman of CALM. And he was looking for a replacement CEO. For the founding CEO had left after 12 years, I think. And so he said, would I come and have a look at it? And I went for a month, literally, to have a look at it and write a paper, a deck on what you should do with it. And that's 8 years ago. Yeah.
And what was it about it that appealed to you, do you think?
It's a brand, baby. No, I could have just written down, it's the brand, stupid. That's because it was very small. There were 8 people there at the time.
Yeah.
And then another 8 on the helpline. It was mail only. It was very niche, and it was making less than £1 million a year. So it was very small, but there was just always, straight away, there was something about the brand which was really interesting. And I think an opportunity to not behave in any way that sector expectations may set. So venerable, brilliant organisations like Mind and Samaritans and other organisations, which we all know from these huge mega brands, do not behave the same way as we do. And that's fine and good, because we appeal. Well, I kind of always felt there was space to appeal to an underserved audience who would like to see feeling shit written on a poster, and would like to have a kind of a cultural positioning for what we try to do, which would reach them through comedy and football and music and all sorts of things where you wouldn't necessarily expect mental health, let alone suicide prevention, to exist. So that's kind of what we set off on. Well, the thing was brilliant when I got there. I'm not taking credit for it, but we did set off very much on that cultural route 8 years ago.
So moving on to PR specifically then, a study last year found that 92% of PR pros think work-related stress has negatively affected their mental health. Would you say then comms professionals particularly maybe are more vulnerable to mental health challenges?
I think there's a swathe of jobs and industries where we all kind of are affected in very similar ways. And it's really interesting to me in looking at the way that the culture at CALM has developed, that people will often say it feels more like an agency or a record label or something when you come to, we've got a railway arch in Waterloo, and when you come in it feels like that. But I'm very conscious as well that with that come the same sort of professional pressures that PR professionals, creatives, people that work in telly, people that work in music. I think maybe if you're a long way outside of these industries, you may see it as a soft touch, that you there's drinks after work and you sit at a desk and you talk about ideas and things. And that could appear, I think, from the outside to be easy compared to other jobs, which are maybe more manually taxing, maybe. But what I've seen in all of those hundreds and hundreds of jobs that I've had in different parts of the sort of the creative industries is that the pressure to keep that performance level high, to follow up a good idea with another good idea, to be the person that delivers, to be the person that's there when everybody else has gone. Presenteeism, definitely bullying right across every part of the media that I've worked in. Bullying as well, sort of really conveniently hidden in things like the quality of the work. I mean, the work is the only important thing here when you're grinding people into the ground on 0 hours contracts and minimum wage. And it's probably down to the inherent competitiveness of what it is that we all do, that you are as good as your last bit of work and you're very, very easily dispensed with. Or that's certainly the feeling. And certainly the way that I think the vast majority of in my experience, agencies and media owners have been run for years, is that the most horrible bastard wins.
I mean, as you say, common issues, definitely. We hear about things like overwhelming workloads, as you mentioned, and struggling maybe also to switch off is one, which obviously lead to burnout. I was just wondering if there's any advice then you would give to maybe some PR professionals on how to manage this better.
Yeah, that was the word I was just about to use. We just did some work on burnout, which is not a kind of a coffee cup slogan. It's a real thing. And getting away from the pressures, that feeling of entrapment is so important. There's three things that calm works to give people. One is a sense of self-worth, which can sometimes be very hard in your professional setting if things aren't going well. A sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself. And actually, I think if our industries have something really outstanding, it is that sense of belonging. We often do, especially in an agency or a media owner, we feel really a part of a gang, don't we? But that can also lead to entrapment. And that's the third thing which we try to help people with, is to not feel that their options are so critically limited that they can only go to very, very dark places. And burnout is absolutely a real thing. Getting away from that entrapment, getting away from the pressure of work, getting away from that cyclical, repetitive thinking, that catastrophization that when something's gone wrong, things are going to go wrong again. Clearing your head, getting away from it, pausing. It's okay. It'll be all right. Honest.
You mentioned presenteeism. That's a word that we've heard a few times in the last few weeks with the whole flexible working debate, both from WPP and in the wider working world. I wonder what your thoughts are on the whole office work from home split, because I mean, there are arguments for both sides, really. A study last year by the PRCA and the CIPR found that post-pandemic flexible working has been good for work-life balance and mental health, partially because of less commuting time. But others have said it's a double-edged sword because people can feel more isolated when they're working from home. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think you've got to take all the lessons along the way and not feel that one camp is right and one camp is wrong. I think there clearly, I mean, the clue's in the hybrid word, right? It's a mixture. I think it doesn't do anybody any favours when a former FTSE 100 CEO in his almost invariably 60s starts telling people that young people are foolish and they're lazy and they just want avocados. I just think that's counterproductive and dumb because it's not true. And it's just more bloody swaggering and ego and nonsense. But I do believe absolutely that either extreme is damaging. And I think also that you can get the combination of those extremes wrong too. The way that we put it all together is important. So we run a 9-day fortnight. So every other Friday is contractually a day off. And that came through in the pandemic when people were losing their goddamn minds in front of screens. And I put that, we called it, they were bank holidays, but we named them after people. So Scroggs, I mentioned our chairman, the first one was St. Scroggs Day. Then it just carried on and we found that we didn't lose any kind of productivity. We found that people probably do work a bit later on a Thursday if it's a day off the next day, but you wake up on Friday and you've forgotten that it was a day off. That's the best feeling in the entire world. But it's become a really important part of our culture. We are in the office 2 days a week, but we absolutely, if there's a requirement for more, everybody knows we're coming at it from a really good, positive place. So I think complete presenteeism, 5 days in the office, I just don't know how you can put that toothpaste back in the tube. I don't feel that. I mean, maybe that's how it works over the next, maybe I'm being absolutely naive, and over the next 10 years, we are all back in the office 5 days a week. I mean, there's what was it? Show me a crisis, I'll show you who's selling it. So these crises. There are a lot of people with a lot of reasons for people wanting people to be back in the office, and so always think about that news story and where the cycles originated. But also, I do think, as a man of a certain age, and certainly 5 days a week up until pandemic in the office was just the absolute complete standard norm, and to think of anything different would be really weird. I really do worry about, like, when I was a kid just out of university and trying to work out how to do jobs and how to learn how to be good at things. I think one of the best things you can have in your life is if you're able to put on the hat that you want to put on when you go to work. You can choose to be this person, because I tell you what, I'm not the CEO at home. I'll be very, very clear. I'm below the dog. But I put on this hat when I go to work, and you can learn how to create your at-work character that suits you and makes you feel happy. And it might be that your at-work character is different to your normal character, and that's cool as well. I fear that the workplace culture can be really, really great, and people can learn from other people. They can meet amazing people that influence the rest of their lives, that help them understand how to conduct themselves in the workplace, either for in a poor way, for back to the biggest bastard wins, in ways just to ruthlessly defeat others. But hopefully, much more than that, you can learn about how you can make great friendships through work, and how you can find that part of your life, which constitutes a big time commitment, how you can find that really satisfying and fulfilling, and be something which is not a chore, but in PR, but in communication, media, creative industries, something which can constitute, real sort of nutrition for the soul. And you miss out on that. It does worry me that if you are, especially we have people in lockdown working on ironing boards, that's terrible. And it can be very, very difficult to do that. There's clearly the right balance and blend for every company, but you have to take into account your employees, what's going to actually make them productive. Because to say, get into the office and put your jacket on the back of the chair, the research does not back that up as being a one-size-fits-all at all.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, really. Okay, moving on to the topic of mental wellness PR campaigns. We ran a piece recently where we spoke to some creative directors and behavioural change specialists about it, and they suggested that progress has perhaps slowed in some places. There was a general view that mental health campaigns can tend to preach to the already converted. What would you say to that?
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah, it's a worrying thing, and I think compassion fatigue is really starting to play a part. But also we have to be clever and more inventive in our communication. That to keep banging on about talking, I think it's the right thing, because talking about your concerns does help people. Our concern from a communication perspective is that we are getting, I think, quite a lot of yawn move on, because we've been going on about it for a long time, and we just need to make our messaging change and adapt to what audiences will find receptive. We were very lucky to be a part of Heads Together, which was the Royal Foundation thing with Harry and William back in 2018, which was all about talk about your mental health. And that was my first exposure to it, having come out of a very different world. And I think then it felt a little bit repetitive. And it also felt a little bit like we were encouraging communication without any form of education. So, all right, I've got to talk about something I don't want to talk about, I don't understand. How do I do that? What happens when I do? I don't think we ever really managed to land that simple or simplistic messaging in a way that's going to have real longevity. But what I think we are seeing as well is something of a backslide. I think we are starting to see rejection. I think just to that point on home working, there is a demonisation of people under 30 or people under 24, definitely. Tony Blair banging on last week, but resilient. I think he's talking about resilience, saying that there's this kind of assumption now that everybody who's under 40 has been diagnosed with ADHD, and it's just such bollocks. It's such sensationalist nonsense. In great progress, people are finding ways to get help for conditions in their brain that people older than them didn't have the advantages to get help. That's great. I'm really pleased they are. It's brilliant. And we are on I'm going off on one now, but we are embarking on a journey, on a kind of a cultural journey that actually neurodiversity can start to feel just like a part of the whole mix of humanity. But at the other end of the scale, the demonisation really does get on my nerves. And that backslide, I think, comes as well with something of a shift towards populism, a shift into more reactionary political territory, something which certainly is less about kindness, tolerance and embracing difference, and much more about trying to find ways to throw blame around at people. I mean, the punching down is quite annoying. So all that means is we've got to find better ways to communicate. We've got to find other ways to push buttons and ways to get to people that may be resistant to the legacy messaging of let's talk about your feelings to somebody. It's not that old, but maybe it starts to feel like legacy. And we've got to find different ways to get to people and change behaviour, because that's all we're trying to do. I mean, I'd always think that if you're flogging washing powder, what you're trying to do is to get somebody to do something they didn't expect to do. So when they go into Waitrose over the road and they want to go and buy Persil, they come out with something else because they saw the marketing and their behaviour changed. We've just got to keep up with messaging, and we've got to understand that if our audience is now unreceptive to the messages that were working, then we shift them and we change them when we meet that audience and change their minds.
I think that's especially relevant given that we hear a lot now about like the isolation of certain groups, like young men, for example, and sort of the anti-woke movement and things like that. It's how do you get them to respond without using that traditional messaging?
Totally right. You said woke now, and that'll get me going for an
Sorry.
Do you ever listen to the news and just think, how the fuck are we still doing all of this? We not got past all of this.
Yeah.
And we're not. We kind of, it does feel like we're taking handbrake turns into horrible, terrible places that have Andrew Tate in them. But then at other times, it's sort of, you're never really more than a couple of days away from another crisis, and it always has been the same and always will be. I do think it's communication challenge, and if the world rejects horrible term woke, also known as aware and kind, that's another way of calling it out. If we do get that mass rejection of that, then that's clearly not the way for us to continue our communication. We have to go at something else. Maybe we have to go at happiness as being a way to succeed at life, at work. Maybe we have to go and power it up in different ways for different audiences to be receptive to it. We work with formerly Carling and now with Beavertown, but as our beer partner. Bit strange, mental health organisation having a beer partner, but we know that people drink pints. I drink pints, and we know that people go to pubs and have nice times, and we know that blokes will struggle to talk to each other quite often unless they've had 6 pints, and then it's regret and it doesn't come out right. And it's what we want to do in working with those partners is nudge our audience to think that when they're at the pub or at home, but at the pub with a pint and a friend, to ask your friend how they're doing is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of leadership. 82% of men in the UK want to be that leader, and we can start to communicate those sorts of behaviours around ways which maybe make you more roughy-tufty rather than less. But understanding your audience and how you can motivate them to change is obviously the same for everything. Washing powder, mental health.
So obviously organisations like Calm are instrumental in raising awareness, but how much of a responsibility do you think the wider businesses have to be addressing mental health in their campaigns too? So beyond things like World Mental Health Day.
I don't think they've got any responsibility at all. I think they've got stuff to sell. If hitching your wagon to mental health is going to help, then do it. I mean, I think the failed attempts are many and hilarious. Sticking flowers in the end of guns, that sort of stuff. But then the great examples are perhaps rare, but brilliant. We have, right from the start of certainly my time at Calm, the first person I hired was a partnership director at Universal Pictures who was putting Minions on Happy Meals, was doing that stuff. So brand partnerships have always been really, really important to us. In the past, those partnerships were about Calm piggybacking corporate audience so that we would get to more people, and we would be very, very grateful for that. Actually, as we've grown our brand, at the risk of being arrogant, it's now flipped the other way. So the brands now want to put that lock up next to ours, and they want to get the goodness of working with Calm and what that does to their brand. Actually underpinning the motivation of every brand that we've ever worked with is, I should be really clear about this, great people who want to do good in the world, but they don't have a responsibility to do that. I think the exemplars are actually really close today, are really important today. So we've worked with hundreds of corporate partners like Spotify and Netflix and Nike and Dave and Bauer Media and all sorts. And they have, without exception, been brilliant. Today, we're incredibly grateful to the individuals at corporate partners who have helped us with our really big kind of tentpole campaigns. So Iceland Foods are just amazing. I had no idea until I started work with them. They're not actually doing this to sell more, but I really hope that when somebody is making a choice about whether they're going to go to supermarket A or Iceland, something is going to go into their head and they're going to realise and remember that Iceland paid for Miss Birthdays, which is our campaign. We've just launched the second phase of that. And we've given Iceland all the credit because they should have all the credit. They paid for it. But they paid for it. Tarsum Dhaliwal, who's the CEO, and Richard Walker, who's the executive chairman, they wrote us a cheque because they saw the campaign and they believed in it, and they've got behind what we're trying to do in preventing suicide amongst young people. But there are brand benefits in doing so. And then another one today is ITV, who have been our partner since 2018. And this morning in particular, we've just been on this morning launching the campaign. And ITV, you may think, don't get any kind of tangible benefit, but Carolyn McCall, the CEO, just 3 or 4 months ago in a speech was talking about the fact that the last photo, previous campaign we did with them in 2022, improved the commercial performance for ITV, because we all live in a world of interconnected, largely decent people who see ITV supporting the last photo and Calm, and who knows, subconscious bias, I don't know, but somewhere they then that will infiltrate their media buy, because when ITV are the most awarded broadcaster and Calm is the most awarded brand in the world, as we were in 2023.
Nice.
Yeah. And we're waving Grand Prix from Cannes around. Advertisers want to work with them, and ITV Creative start to have better relationships with, or more broader relationships with advertisers. So whilst there is no responsibility on a brand to involve itself with anything, I think that when you are considering where you want your brand to be, consider what you want the world to be like as well. I wear the item of clothing that would associate with not only with like the coolness as it's perceived, but what that brand does in the world and what you're trying to say to the world about yourself when you behave that way.
Yeah, I mean, fascinating stuff. And
Patagonia is the hat that I have, because I just think there's something about their behaviour and that brand and what it says about the world. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, people are definitely making more conscious decisions, and you can understand why a lot of brands would want to tap into that. What advice would you give to brands that have never ventured into maybe the mental health awareness space? How can they begin to do so?
Do it like you mean it. I mean, you're caught very quickly if it's performative.
Yeah. And
there has to be an output, a tangible output. Just standing on a box and saying, be nice to each other, you're not going to achieve anything. But also back that up with action. And by action, that can mean a charitable donation. It can mean the creation of a product. So we've just launched the Calm Care Kit, CARE, which is a tool we want to get to every single adult in the UK to prevent suicide. At the moment, we're focusing on, as mentioned, young people, but that tool is applicable for everybody. Now, we could not have made that care kit or made it available and give people the awareness that it's there without ITV, Lad Bible, Bauer Media, JC&Co, Pearl and Dean, Adam and Eve, 7 Stars. I just keep Hope and Glory, and then most importantly, ITV pushing that, and along with Lad Bible. So when they're considering what they're doing in the world, I know that the individuals at all of those organisations aren't working with Calm and pushing through with things like the care kit so that they can fill out a good report. It's because when we do good stuff, we get the nice little drops of the good stuff back. And that statistic of 82% of men in the UK wanting to be the mate that helps their friends, it's because we do exist in a more interconnected way than we might sometimes assume. And to cut back to that, our starting point about these kind of industries, we can be left to think that we're an individual racing against other individuals in a hyper-competitive environment, and forget that we are actually interconnected, and that when all those great organisations do good stuff in the world, other good things will happen, including commercial performance.
So then, are there any examples of mental health awareness campaigns in recent years, aside obviously from those you've been involved in,
there's only come, no.
that you've maybe been partially impressed by?
I do really wish we'd said fuck the fruit. Why didn't we say fuck the fruit? Because that's the most calm thing.
Yeah.
The A6, fuck the fruit. Brian Cox behind a desk in character. The desk is the thing that's going to kill you. Get your shoes on and go for a run. And yeah, so you'll stay chained to your desk for 9 hours a day. What's it for Fruit Wednesday?
Yeah,
Fuck the fruit.
The desk break is what it was called.
Yeah.
But,
It's just great. It's brilliant. And back to, I think we were talking about, probably I was banging on, but about exploiting different forms of communication channel. Humour is just brilliant. It's the greatest rug pull that you can have. Suicide prevention and humour, you would just think it works. It's great, and it just connects synapses in different ways. So I love Fuck the Fruit. I think everything that Dove has done has been really, really great, and the positioning of Dove next to those causes. There was the eating disorder ad that they did, which I thought was incredibly powerful. The brand is sailing so close to a dangerous wind that the opportunity for backlash, the public is just desperately there behind his little keyboard. Why, oh, why, oh, why? But they pulled it off beautifully, and the brand has come out looking great. Why? Because it's great. Because it's just been doing these things in order to try to make a difference in the world. And yeah, those are pieces of work that I'm not jealous of. That would be an unhealthy emotion, but they're good.
Are there any aspects of mental wellness which you think are under-addressed in awareness campaigns? Any unexplored angles which could use more attention? Or I suppose on the other side, tropes that you'd like to see the back of that you think are overused?
Yeah, I don't think it's okay to not be okay. Because it isn't. It's that sort of thing, you can accept it and it's all right. I don't think it is. I think I'd prefer a more front-footed approach of it. Lots of people are not okay, so let's try to make it so that you are. And those tropes can perpetuate. Talking about it without education does very little good. We need to know how to help people, and that's the creation of practical tools and more effective pressure on government to change the way that funding has taken place. We haven't had a concerted go at government. I mean, this lot's only been around for 6 months, but we should look at where we are with government. The money that was given by the last government, which was a pitifully small amount, and Calm didn't get any, but that funding runs out in 2025. There's no commitment from this government to do anything more with it. So yeah, I think pressure on government to do things is important. The angles are there to be exploited. I'm not going to tell you which ones we're going down. What are you trying to do? I'll tell the competition. Being deeply in culture is our positioning, and so you'll see us pop up in mad places.
Yeah, I think that really works. I think that's what people need really in order to pay attention and not just kind of switch off from it, like you were saying.
I think you mentioned finger wagging or preaching. That's why we haven't moved on, I think, as much as we may have done had we had a concerted effort to behave like brands and talk to our audiences like consumers or customers.
I don't think you can answer this. So, as we've mentioned, Calm's known for its eye-catching campaigns, and they've obviously gained a lot of traction, which isn't easy, I think, in the mental health space. But what's your secret? What do you think makes a successful campaign in your eyes?
A question that I get asked quite a lot is, how do you do it? And I don't know if that's the same as what's your secret, but how do so we have been really fortunate, and the how do you do it is you have to employ people that just have it in them, that know how to do it, that aren't trying to learn, that aren't coming at it from as in campaign creation, production, working the campaign, understanding in the way that all everybody that listens to this probably understands that it can look kind of relatively simple when you start pushing it towards the door and then out the door, but we all know that that's when you're running the hardest and you're trying to think of a million things and deal with them all, and you have to have that kind of muscle memory. And so employing people that are able to just come at the task with experience is so important. I spent my first year at Calm pretty much wearing out pairs of shoes, walking around all the people that I met in my previous life in music TV and advertising, and just kind of wearing my shoes out and saying to them, what are you going to do? I had a deck which I pretentiously called the holy shit numbers. And when I read them out, people would go, holy shit. And you go, yeah, what are you going to do? And some of those people just were, well, I'll do this. And it's actually 8 years later that I'm still working with a lot of the people that first spoke to about Calm in 2017 or 18. And that's probably part of the secret sauce is our relationships with agencies like Hope and Glory, who have now been with us for 8 years, I think, and have worked on all the really big ones that we've done, and a lot of the sort of midweight ones too. And I hope they would agree that our relationship with Hope and Glory, as with all the other agencies that we work with, from media to creative to digital and everything else and performance and everything, we behave like a client. We behave like a paying client, and we're not. We're a pro bono client. But we always behave like we're paying. And we behave like a client that has great relationship with their agency rather than a scumbag bully that just wants to cause a noise because we're paying. And we've all come across those kinds of clients who think that because there's an invoice waiting to be paid, they can treat people like dirt. But we don't. What we do is we will always try to improve the work. So relationships with Hope and Glory, and I think perhaps really pointedly with Adam and Eve DDB, who've been at one of our, well, certainly our lead creative agency for a really long time. We do that great thing where the work comes out better if we interrogate it, and when we try different things and we push each other to improve it. Hope and Glory are with us on that journey, not from the creative ideation, but how do they take that out into the rest of the world? And I think if you're coming at trying to run a whopper of a campaign like Miss Birthdays that we're doing now, and you don't have the people in your team that have done it for commercial brands, done it for media owners, done it for agencies, then you're not going to get all those composite parts, like making it better, the client being demanding, but also being generous, and being creative, but also being responsible. And then just understanding how the day-to-day, what it's like, what a suit at an agency does, versus what a strategist does, versus what a creative does, versus what an account manager does, and understanding how to make the machine hum. And then kind of knowing what good looks like. It's cliche, isn't it? But really knowing what good is. And believe it or not, and I'm not telling any tales out of school, when we go through our briefing and then our creative process with creative agencies, even Adam and Eve, and we've worked with lots and lots of different agencies. I'm just mentioning them because we've got Miss Birthdays up at the moment. We'll go through 20 ideas before we get to the one that's right. And if you've got the right relationship between your client and your agency and the staff, if you like, the team on both of those organisations, that's not a problem. It's great. It's part of learning, and it's part of getting to a point that it's not, maybe it is a tad obsessive, a bit obsessive, because when it's something like suicide prevention, we've got so many different things to think about. We've got a clinical perspective, what is actually going to stop people from doing what we want them to stop. We've got a clinical perspective of, is there any danger that we're doing harm in the world, which of course would be the worst possible thing. And then that harm comes down to detail like, so we had the 7,000 balloons in Westfield.
Yeah.
I went to balloon casting meetings. What a job! I've been meetings with a balloon architect. What the hell are we doing, wasting our time with this when we could be balloon architects? But we were advised from our clinical advisors and academic advisors to most birthday balloons have like little bits of tinsel coming off them and stuff. Yeah. Take that off. It can't be. We have to be obviously birthday balloons, but they can't be celebratory, because you start to get different sorts of clinical effects from things. So there's a billion things to think about. This is a stupidly long answer to quite a short question, so I apologise. But it's really that understanding how all the bits work together and being a really good client and a good citizen.
Yeah, absolutely. And not letting the client agency relationship slack just because it's a pro bono account.
Yeah, I've had one occasion, honestly, in 8 years of doing this pro bono, where somebody in a meeting, they presented something and it was okay. It wasn't great, but it had potential maybe. And somebody said, "What about that?" And the person from the agency just said, "Well, you're not paying us, so why are you And it was like, well, meeting over.
Yeah.
Because we're in this, all of your questions about why would people want to do it? What's the motivation? There has to be a motivation because you want to be doing good in the world.
So as you've mentioned, today you've launched the second phase of your Miss Birthdays campaign, which this time centres on youth suicide. Could you tell us a bit more about it and what else Calm's got coming up next?
Yeah. We sort of shine our light on audiences that we think are in need of particular help or issues, ways of communication that we think are particularly important. In the last 2 years, the Office of National Statistics has shown that whereas in the past, Gen X was the fastest ever growing group to demonstrate suicidality, a propensity to consider suicide and death by suicide and attempts. And that group has taken that behaviour all the way through its life from adolescence through to middle age. So one thing we know is that it's a cohort behaviour, but we learn as a group these kinds of behaviours. And there's a great writer called John Niven who is now my friend, and I go and drink beer with him, and it's great. He writes some of the funniest, rudest books you'll ever read. And he was in the record business at the same time I was in the record business, and he's a brilliant, foul-mouthed Scottish git. But he wrote a book called Oh Brother about the death of his brother, and there was a line that got me so much. His brother died when he was 40 by suicide. And John looks at his little kids and he thinks, not only how can I prevent you thinking about killing yourself now, but how can I do that for when you're 20, 30, when you're 40 and we're dead, when you're 50, how can I do that? And it's about short-circuiting that behaviour now for this young group, because the ONS have shown that 16 to 30-year-olds are the fastest growing group that's ever been. So suicide and suicidality is a worse problem for young people than it has been for any group in history, which is why perhaps when I do see FTSE 100 CEOs saying that young people can't buy houses because they are too frivolous and they just want avocados, that really, really winds me up, as does the demonisation of younger people in general when they're suffering with so many different pressures. So we started thinking about creative a long time ago, a year ago, and created what we've called a programme of work, which is known as Firebreak. So Firebreak is the prevention of that behaviour now in young people so they don't take it with them. The creative execution, first of all, with ITV from Adam and Eve and Hope and Glory and Seven Stars was in Westfield in Shepherd's Bush, biggest shopping centre in Europe, where we took over the whole of the atrium. And it's worth mentioning that Westfield gave us that for nothing for a week, over 150,000 people walking through there in that time. But we broadcast live this morning, came from Westfield as well, where we'd put 6,929 birthday balloons, which commemorated the 6,929 young people who've died by suicide in the last decade. And each balloon had a number on it, which was the birthday they didn't reach. And that pushed, actually, as you walked through the balloons, which is quite incredible, there were voice notes from bereaved families talking about the young person that had died, and stuff that really stuck out with things like, there's a mother talking about her son, which says that we talked about everything. We talked about drugs, alcohol, girls, violence, but it never occurred to me to talk about suicide. And when it's the biggest killer of young people, this thing we have culturally where we don't want to talk about it is the biggest obstacle to preventing it. And I don't want to say talking about it really in that soft way, but just saying it. Saying it prevents it. And so that was the first outing, was Miss Birthdays in Westfield. But that was where we launched the Care Kit, where CARE is a digital tool, asset. C is check-in on the young people in your lives, whether you're a parent or a friend or a colleague or a sports coach, what we refer to as trusted adults. A is ask how they're doing, but ask them if they're having suicidal thoughts. If you're worried about them, ask them. Get that word out there. We have to culturally change this. We have to get it so that we can talk to young people and say that word. You're not thinking about doing something stupid, are you? I mean, there's only one answer to that. There's only you only say no to that. But if you can say to somebody that you're concerned about, are you having suicidal thoughts? They can then, if they are, get some help, because just saying it prevents it, talking about it prevents it. CA. Then R is remain with them, but remove harm. So some advice that we have from our helpline, which is a free to call service, which we run 7 days a week, is literally, if you are very concerned about somebody, remove the sources of harm, paracetamol, blades, those kind of things. And then E is escalate to trusted services like CALM, like Samaritans, but to formal medical healthcare and 999 if you need to. That care kit operates right the way across the continuum, as we call it, people who feel great. So kids that have never had, people that have never had anything wrong in their lives and they feel brilliant, they should still have access to the care kit because stuff changes. We're all on a very, very complex journey. So that was the launch of the care kit. Today, we wanted to focus in not on the 6,929, but on one individual story to really thump that home. And that is a story about a girl called Evelyn who died just over 2.5 years ago. And we've made a film directed by Seb Edwards, who's a all-round annoyingly cool guy, handsome and successful, and he's friends with Robert Smith out of The Cure. I hate him. But it's taken him 6 months to direct this film. And he's an artist. The way that he's taken found footage, created interstitial shots, cutaways, and turned it into something which has real narrative solidity and congruity is just beautiful. But I think actually even more than that, the friendship and the trust that he created with Jack and Jenny, who are Evelyn's parents, who have done, I mean, the bravest, the most incredible thing. They lost their little girl and they don't want anybody else to experience that. They work with Seb and his production team to create this film and through this really trusted relationship. So it's 2 minutes long and it's long in its longest form. Music was given to us by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, which we're very, very grateful. And it went up live today with This Morning on ITV and across all of our channels. And we're going to be pushing that over the next 6 months to drive, as we seriously want every UK adult to be aware of it and know how to use it. Because if you didn't know 999 was there, you wouldn't know what to do when your house was on fire.
Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today, but thanks so much to Simon for such a brilliant chat on a really important topic. Before we go, I just wanted to flag some of PRWeek's upcoming events. You can still enter the Brand Film Awards, which celebrates the best brand storytelling on film. The deadline to enter is February 6th, so don't miss out. PRWeek's Corporate Affairs Awards are also still open for entries. These awards recognise the leading projects, teams and people in corporate affairs. Final entries are accepted until 13th of February. And finally, our annual Crisis Comms Summit returns to London on the 12th of February. Hear from top names including Samsung, Every and Royal Mail. Spaces are limited, so book your place today. And if you've enjoyed this episode, then we'd love it if you could leave a review, please, wherever you access PRWeek's Beyond the Noise podcast. Thanks for listening, and until next time, goodbye.